She sat across from me at the small breakfast table, arms crossed like a closing argument. The ceramic coffee mug in front of her sat untouched, steam long gone. Her eyes weren't remorseful, just defensive, like she was already building a case she knew couldn't stand. "It was just one night," she said. The words hung in the air, sterile and practiced, like she'd rehearsed them in the mirror. Or worse, in someone else's arms. I didn't respond immediately, didn't flinch. I just blinked, once, slowly, then looked past her shoulder to the fridge where our wedding magnet still held up last summer's grocery list. "That's all I needed to know," I said, voice steady. I stood, left my half-finished eggs untouched, walked into the kitchen, and opened the bottom drawer beside the fridge. The file drawer she hadn't noticed I'd installed 2 months ago. She turned slightly, confusion surfacing for the first time. Her voice softened. "Too late." "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Inside the drawer was a manila folder, labeled, weighted. I slid it out, its contents organized down to the timestamp. I hadn't gone looking for betrayal, but once it started revealing itself, quietly, digitally, I couldn't look away. I sat on the stool, spread the folder in front of me. Still didn't look at her. She shifted her weight. "I told you because I didn't want to lie anymore." The corner of my mouth twitched. That almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was pathetic. She didn't tell me out of guilt. She told me because she thought it would earn her points for disclosure. Like a teenager admitting to sneaking out only after getting caught on the neighbor's camera. I spoke evenly. "You mean you didn't want to keep track of which version of the story you'd already told?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. That made her blink. I slid the first sheet across the counter. A blurry screenshot from Instagram. A group selfie, 7 women, arms tangled, drinks raised, hotel bar in the background. I had zoomed in, past the grain, past the soft lighting. Her hand, recognizably hers by the ring she stopped wearing months ago, rested on a man's leg. That alone wouldn't have been enough, but the timestamp matched the night she'd claimed. Girls' night. Claimed she was crashing at her friend Lily's place. That friend, by the way, had tagged the location. Not Lily's condo. A downtown hotel. She reached for the photo. I placed my palm over it. She paused, hands suspended midair, then slowly drew it back. "I don't," she started. "I know," I said. "You don't remember. It was blurry. You were drinking. You weren't thinking clearly." I lifted my gaze to her for the first time. Her mascara was perfect. No smudges. No tears. "You were thinking clearly enough to schedule it," I said. "Hotel reservation. New perfume. The silk set? Still had the tags. You thought I wouldn't notice the bag in the trash, but you left the receipt." Her lips parted slightly. Not in shock, in recalculation. She was realizing this wasn't a confrontation. It was a deposition. I stood, placed the rest of the folder on the table, and pushed it toward her. "I'm going for a walk," I said. "When I come back, I'll expect the truth, the whole thing. Not the version you think I can handle." Her voice followed me as I reached the door. It didn't mean anything. That stopped me. I turned my head halfway, not enough to look at her, just enough for my voice to land solidly. That's what makes it worse. Then I left her in the silence she created. Not slamming the door. Not shouting. Just letting the click of it closing carry all the weight she refused to feel. By the time I got back, she hadn't moved. The manila folder was still on the table, unopened. That told me everything. She wasn't ready to face it, not because she couldn't, but because she was still calculating her angle. She thought silence was safer than confession. Silence gives her room to revise later. I stepped inside, hung my keys, and studied her face. It was composed, too composed. Not the look of a woman unraveling, but of one trying to spin her collapse into a negotiation. She spoke without lifting her eyes. "You said you wanted the truth. I already have it," I said. "I want your version." She hesitated. Then, as if surrendering something trivial, she sighed. "It was just once." I sat across from her again. "You didn't slip. You scheduled." She flinched at that. Not visibly, but her hand, which had been resting against her thigh, twitched. I opened the second file. Pulled out the receipt from the boutique downtown. The place she only ever shopped at when she wanted to feel expensive. One silk set. Still had the price sticker. I knew because I'd taken out the trash that morning. The black bag had caught on the bin lip and torn, spilling out the contents. That receipt was dated 3 days before the girls' night. The reservation confirmation for the hotel bar? Booked 4 days before that. The ride-sharing log she hadn't scrubbed yet? Showed her being picked up outside our house at 6:17 p.m. and dropped off at a luxury hotel. She'd even tipped extra. Then, 2 hours later, another log, same account, dropped her off at Lily's apartment. Her fallback alibi. This wasn't impulse, I said. This was logistics. She finally looked up at me then, her eyes searching mine, trying to gauge how much I'd already put together. Whether I was bluffing, whether she could still salvage the narrative. You weren't there, she said softly, as if that explained anything. You've been so distracted lately. That stung more than I expected, because it was partially true. I had been working longer hours, dealing with layoffs at the firm, but I had also been planning our anniversary trip. She didn't know that part. Never asked? So your answer to feeling unseen, I said slowly, was to become someone else's secret? Her lips parted, but I didn't let her speak. You didn't forget to delete the receipt. You didn't forget to hide the trash. You were testing what you could get away with. I leaned forward, elbows on the table now, letting the weight of my stare carry more than my voice ever could. You didn't want to confess, I said. You wanted to see if you could walk past me with this in your back pocket, and not even flinch. A pause followed, heavy. Not because she was guilty, but because she was cornered. Her breathing changed, shallower, quicker. The kind of panic that comes when control starts slipping through fingers already slick with denial. She shifted again, reaching for a piece of paper from the pile. Not one of the printed receipts, her email thread. This isn't what you think, she said. No, I said quietly. It's exactly what I think. Her eyes darted to the email header. She'd forgotten I had access. That, or she thought deleting it meant erasure. But I'd pulled the recovery logs. The thread had been sent 2 days after that night. Not to apologize, not to process, but to strategize. She had written, if he finds out, I'll say it was just once. That's forgivable, right? That wasn't guilt. That was theater. And the man's reply? Depends what you want from the separation. That would come next. But not yet. Not until I finished showing her how thoroughly she'd underestimated me. You had choices, I said. You just made yours in advance. She swallowed hard, and for the first time since this all started, she looked like someone beginning to understand the depth of her own miscalculation. I stood again. Calm. Measured. I'm going to make dinner, I said. And when I put it on the table, you're going to sit down and listen to everything I've prepared. And this time, she didn't argue. Dinner was already halfway done when I heard her footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. I let the sound of the skillet speak for me. Garlic and shallots searing in butter, a dish I hadn't cooked in months. It used to be her favorite. She lingered in the doorway. I don't know what else you want me to say. That voice again, rehearsed exhaustion, not actual remorse. As if I'd kept her past a reasonable interrogation time. I plated the food without answering, sat at the head of the table. She moved hesitantly to her usual spot. I didn't wait for her to thank me or comment on the meal. I slid the next sheet across the table. No introduction. No preamble. Her face went pale as she recognized the bank statement. You prepaid the hotel, I said, watching her eyes track the highlighted line. Champagne for 2. Upgraded suite. All on our shared account. Bold. I didn't mean. She started, then cut herself off. You didn't mean for me to find it. That I believe. She looked away, and I took that as permission to continue. I tapped the next document in the stack. A rideshare receipt with the driver's name I'd already called. A woman named Jenna who remembered them. Said she'd driven my wife and her friend Lily to the hotel that night. No bags, just perfume and confidence. Said she picked them up around 10:45 p.m., but only my wife was in the car. Said she seemed satisfied. I slid the final piece toward her. A text thread printed from the cloud backup she hadn't wiped thoroughly enough. Lily's name at the top. He totally bought it. Girls' night was a success. Her hands stayed in her lap. She didn't touch the page. Didn't argue anymore. I think that moment, more than the photos or the bank logs, was what broke the last illusion for her. This wasn't about a single bad decision. This was about conspiracy. About coordination. Her friend had driven her to betrayal and back, then texted her like it was a prank. She tried again, voice thinner this time. Lily didn't mean. She's already blocked me, I said, sipping water like I wasn't boiling underneath. Guess she picked a side. Her silence was the first honest thing she'd given me all night. I leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath the weight of everything she didn't say. You weren't just stepping out, I said. You were doing it with an entourage. A support team. A getaway driver. She flinched then. Just slightly. Enough. She reached for the plate I'd set in front of her but barely touched the food. I'd made the sauce too rich on purpose. Something about that felt right. Let the guilt sit heavy. Let the taste of normalcy turn in her mouth. We ate in silence. Her fork scraped against ceramic while I watched her unravel bite by bite. She looked down the whole time, not at the food, not at me. Just down, as if gravity could excuse cowardice. When she finally looked up again, there was a crack in her voice. I don't want to lose this. I didn't ask what this meant. Her comfort? Her image? The life she'd spent a year quietly evacuating while I stayed busy preserving it? I finished my meal, stood, cleared my plate while she stayed seated, her fork resting useless in her hand. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. I said, not looking back. You're being served. Wear something nice. Then I walked out of the room. This time, I closed the door behind me. Not loud, just final. The following morning was quiet in the way early mornings shouldn't be. No clatter from the shower. No rustle of a hairdryer or makeup bag. Just the sound of a house adjusting to its new temperature. Colder. I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom, hearing nothing but my own breath. She was still in bed when I entered. Her eyes were open. Blank. You'll want to be downstairs by 7:45, I said. Process servers punctual. She didn't reply. Not out of shock. Not anymore. She had known I wasn't bluffing the moment I laid the papers out like place settings the night before. Her mind was already shifting to defense, mitigation, negotiation. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her like a shield. You really filed? No, I said. I submitted everything last week. This morning is just the formal delivery. Her jaw moved like she wanted to speak, but she wasn't ready for anything that could withstand pushback. So instead she asked, what happens now? I shrugged slightly. You answer for your choices. I protect mine. Downstairs I'd already cleared space. The entry table was bare, save for a single pen, a printed acknowledgement form, and a copy of the initial filing packet. No dependents were involved. We had no shared assets that couldn't be split by simple math. No parenting plans. No visitation schedules. But there were protections. Legal ones. Asset freezes. Mutual access lockdowns. She came down exactly at 7:44, dressed neatly. Makeup faint. Hair pulled back. She looked like someone attending a performance they hadn't auditioned for. She said nothing as she opened the door to the woman on the step, clipboard in hand, ID visible. The brief exchange took less than a minute. I watched it all from the hallway. Once the door clicked shut, she leaned against it. You could have just asked me to leave, she said, voice hollow. I stepped forward, measured in every word. You already did. That night. The next few hours passed in practical silence. She packed in segments, pausing at intervals to check her phone, probably waiting for Lily to reply. Or the man. But both had gone quiet. Her network had gone dark the second exposure started dripping outward. She emerged from the bedroom mid-afternoon with her suitcase trailing behind her. She wore sunglasses inside, which told me what she didn't say aloud. Someone had recognized her. Maybe at the grocery store. Maybe a neighbor. Small circles don't stay quiet long. I opened the front door for her. She stood in the threshold, hesitant. Do you hate me? It wasn't a trick question. It was a last attempt at drama. A fishing line cast too late. I didn't answer. Hate is effort. I watched her step outside. The sun caught the side of her face and for a moment, she looked smaller. Not weak, just reduced. Like someone who'd bet on a story that no longer made sense. The suitcase clicked down the porch stairs, one wheel catching on the edge. She didn't look back. That was the only thing she did right. I shut the door after her. Quiet again. Always quiet now. I walked through the living room, sat on the couch she used to love curling up on with a throw blanket and a glass of wine. Then I opened my laptop and sent the next set of emails, asset notices, shared account closures, digital key revocations. My lawyer was already preparing the next phase. It wasn't about punishment. It was about process. The destruction she triggered had structure now. It had rules, and I was in control of every single one of them. 3 days after she left, the real weight of it hit. Not the grief. That came in fragments, and I expected it. No, what hit first was the coordination behind her performance. The parts one hadn't seen clearly until I stepped outside the frame. The way she hadn't just slipped into betrayal, she'd rehearsed it. I'd kept the recovery software running on the backup drive, combing through the remains of her deleted emails. Most were nothing, confirmations, ads, half-finished drafts. But one thread stopped me. It started harmlessly enough, a forwarded dinner reservation. But then, buried deeper, an exchange dated 2 days before her confession. Subject line: if it comes up. Her words: if he finds out, I'll say it was just once. That's forgivable, right? Not a question of guilt, a calculation. What was marketable as a mistake? The reply came minutes later. A man's email. Not a name I recognized at first, but the address triggered something familiar. Her coworker. From the industry retreat. She had mentioned him before. Casually. Once. Just enough to plant the character. His reply? Depends what you want from the divorce. That line repeated in my head more than anything she said to me directly. Because it wasn't remorse. It was strategy. It told me she'd already played out the endgame. This hadn't been about passion or loneliness or even me. This was about leverage. About setting up a narrative she could use if exposure came. If I ever found out, which she clearly hadn't expected to happen so soon. I closed the laptop, sat back, let the words echo against everything I thought I knew about her. She hadn't confessed. She tested the water, first with silence, then with partial truth, and only after her digital footprints betrayed her did she attempt vulnerability. It changed something in me. I stopped viewing this as recovery. This was now realignment. The next step came quietly. I contacted our shared accountant. A woman I trusted more than she ever realized. We reviewed all shared assets, retirement accounts, joint brokerage, pending equity on the townhouse. I had copies of everything by the end of the day. What I didn't expect was the note from the accountant, flagged with a yellow star. Also, just FYI, a month ago she requested access to run a solo financial health report. Unusual for a non-separation situation. There it was again, the pattern. This wasn't an explosion. It was a migration. A slow drift toward an exit she'd hoped to control. She didn't plan to stay. She planned to be first to leave. But I had closed that window. And now she was stuck on the outside, watching me lock doors she thought she'd slip through unchallenged. That night, I sat with a cup of coffee in the same kitchen where she had once told me she loved the quiet mornings. I could still see her in that chair, laughing, half-dressed, reading off Instagram stories like gossip was oxygen. Now her voice was gone, replaced by the hum of strategic clarity. The betrayal had already happened, but now it was her narrative that was falling apart. And I was holding the pen. The next time I saw her was 2 weeks later. She didn't call ahead, just showed up. I heard the knock while I was setting the table. 2 plates, 1 glass. Not because I expected company, but because some habits die harder than the people who help form them. When I opened the door, she stood there wearing the same wool coat I'd bought her last winter. The collar frayed now, like the rest of her. I thought maybe we could talk, she said, eyes scanning the room behind me. I didn't move, she added quickly. Just dinner. Just a conversation. I didn't answer, just stepped aside. She walked in carefully, like the space had changed without her. It had. A few pieces of furniture were gone. A few photos taken down. The silence that followed her in wasn't the kind that asked for comfort. It was the kind that made you sit up straighter, knowing something unspoken was about to surface. I saw Lily yesterday, she said as she took off her coat, folding it over the back of a chair she no longer had a claim to. She said she tried to reach out. She didn't. I told her not to bother. That told me more than she meant it to. They'd broken ranks. The support team had splintered. She sat down slowly, watching me bring the food over. I didn't ask if she was hungry. She didn't ask what I'd made. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the quiet scrape of fork on plate. Finally, she pushed her food aside and leaned forward. I know I hurt you. I didn't respond. She continued anyway. But I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I held up a hand. Not to stop her. To shift direction. You deleted the text before you came home that night. That silenced her. I let the weight of that sit. You didn't make a mistake and panic. You planned the night, executed it, cleaned it up, and came home expecting everything to look the same. Her breath caught. She was realizing how much I'd uncovered. You wrote in an email that you'd say it was just once. That's forgivable, right? Her mouth opened, then closed again. Whatever script she'd prepared wasn't built for this version of me. You weren't sorry, I said. You were testing what I would believe. And when the truth outpaced your story, you defaulted to pity. I didn't think you'd go this far, she whispered. You mean protect myself? She looked away. I meant, the way you've locked everything down. The lawyer, the statements, even the friends. People are talking. Let them, I said, voice calm. They should know who you are. Her gaze snapped back. That landed harder than anything else I'd said all night. Do you really think I meant for it to go this way? No, I said. I think you thought I'd be too shocked to move, that I'd ask what I did wrong, that I'd offer to fix it. She said nothing. I didn't. I continued. And that's what broke the story you were writing. She pushed back her chair then, slower than before. No drama. Just retreat. I miss how safe I felt with you, she said quietly. That was the first honest thing she'd said since it started. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. She followed without protest, her face tight, her movements tired. As she stepped past me, she paused, her breath just a fraction quicker than before. You used to wait for me to speak, she said, voice brittle. I looked at her. You used to be worth listening to. Then I closed the door before her reply could find its footing. In the days that followed, I didn't hear from her. Not directly. But the consequences of what she'd done kept arriving in pieces. Quiet, sharp ones. A message from a mutual friend. Short, almost apologetic. Did you know about the HR thing? I hadn't. Not yet. I called my attorney. He confirmed it within the hour. Her name had been quietly removed from a leadership shortlist at her firm. The same promotion she'd hinted about at dinner 2 months ago, playing coy, pretending it was still in discussion. It wasn't. It had been in final review. Then someone sent the screenshots. Not from me. I'd kept my side clean. But someone, maybe Lily, maybe another broken confidant, had leaked part of the text thread. The planning, the forgivable strategy. The language wasn't illegal, but it was damning. And in a competitive corporate ecosystem where reputation whispered louder than truth, it was enough. The HR department made a call. Her name was taken off the board. No reprimand, no hearing. Just quiet removal. A small ghosting with career-sized consequences. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching someone unravel this way, not someone I once chose. But I didn't interfere either. You make choices. The world answers back. That same day, I logged into the home security app and removed her access. She still had her profile, likely hadn't thought to check. I waited until she was actively online, mid-argument via text, trying to make one last case for civil resolution. She was saying, I just think we're letting too many outsiders influence this. I changed the code mid-message. The app flashed, access revoked. I replied only once. This is what resolution looks like. No more keys. No more entries. No more audience. That night I walked through the house, slowly, room by room. Not to grieve. To inventory. Not what she took, but what she never saw. The books I'd marked with notes she never read. The half-built record collection I'd tried to share. The cabinet drawer where I'd hidden anniversary reservations she'd never followed through on. She thought this house was an ecosystem orbiting her. But it wasn't. It was a world she skimmed the surface of. And now, finally, it was mine again. Later that evening, I stood on the back porch with a drink in hand, quiet, centered. The air was cool, uncomplicated. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel broken. I felt still. And that was something I hadn't felt in months. Her fallout was spreading. The man she'd risked it all for? He'd gone silent too. A quiet closure of his social accounts. No more tags, no more photos. One day, she'd realize he'd been erasing her the same way she tried to erase the truth. But that wasn't my problem. I had my space back. My name protected. My forward motion returned. And for the first time since her confession, I went to sleep without rehearsing what I should have said. Because there was nothing left to say. It hit me while standing in line at the hardware store, of all places. A man ahead of me made a joke to the cashier, something dumb about duct tape fixing marriages. They both laughed. I didn't, because that's what it had started as, hadn't it? A temporary patch. A quick fix. For her boredom. That's how she saw it. One night. A release valve. Nothing to overhaul the structure, just relief. But betrayal doesn't work that way. It seeps into the beams, she'd said. It was just one night. As if that minimized it. As if logistics didn't count. But I remembered the details better than she probably did. Not just the photos or the receipts, but the tone. The way she'd said she was going out with friends, standing in the doorway adjusting her coat, giving me that casual kiss on the cheek. The way she'd worn perfume she never used with me. Subtle, but sharp. New. I hadn't commented at the time. I'd thought maybe she was trying again. Maybe we were on the verge of reconnecting. She had smiled like nothing was different. And that was the part one kept coming back to. These. She hadn't hesitated. Hadn't fumbled the story. Hadn't even checked her phone nervously. She'd walked out the door with a practiced grace. Which meant she'd rehearsed it. The champagne wasn't an indulgence. It was a cue. What she wore wasn't impulse. It was costume, selected with intent. She wasn't exploring confusion. She was executing clarity. That's what stayed with me long after the confrontation. Not the betrayal itself, but the fluency with which she moved through it. Like someone stepping into a second skin. Her logic wasn't chaos, it was choreography. And when I'd asked her if she remembered what she'd risked, she blinked like I was asking the wrong question. Because she didn't see it as risk. She saw it as leverage. That realization was the final thread for me. The grief had been real. It still came in flashes. A familiar laugh from a passing stranger. The smell of a certain shampoo. That ache wasn't gone. But the reverence? That was dead. What I'd loved was already gone before she ever left. And now, when I looked back on that night, the real night, the one night she insisted was meaningless, I understood it fully. It wasn't meaningless. It was meticulous. And that was why there was no coming back. It was a Thursday when she came back. Early evening. I was on the couch with a folder open in my lap. Paperwork, final signatures, things that needed my name to close the chapter officially. She knocked once, not urgent, not uncertain, just expectant. When I opened the door, she stood there in a pale gray coat. No makeup this time. Hair pulled into a loose tie like she used to wear it on Sundays. There was a nervous softness in her face. But it didn't move me. I miss how safe I felt with you, she said. I stayed quiet. I haven't slept well, she continued. I keep thinking about what I gave up, what I walked away from. I studied her, not with anger, with clarity, because what she missed wasn't me. It wasn't the quiet mornings or the shared history. It was the absence of consequence, the way I made things feel anchored, even when she was drifting. She tried again. You were the one thing in my life I never had to worry about. That's why She stopped, let it trail. I didn't help her find the words. I just stepped back, not to invite her in, to remove myself from the doorway. Then I closed the door behind me, walked out onto the porch and stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to finish. She looked surprised, like the script she'd written required me to stay inside, conflicted, heartbroken. But I didn't feel conflicted. I felt done. I thought maybe, she started. You didn't come here because you're sorry, I said. You came because everything else collapsed. Her lips parted, protest forming. I held up a hand. You lost your support circle. Your job's on thin ice. The man you risked everything for won't return your calls. Now you're circling back to the last thing that felt stable. Me. She looked away. I made a mistake. No, I said. You made a choice. Her shoulders dropped. Her voice thinned. What happens now? I checked my watch. Nothing, I said. Nothing happens now. I turned back toward the door. She took a half step forward. Wait. I stopped. Just enough to let her voice hit my back. I never meant to lose you. I exhaled, the kind of breath that clears a room. You didn't lose me, I said without turning around. You traded me. Then I opened the door, stepped inside, and let it close behind me with a finality she hadn't expected. I didn't look through the peephole. Didn't watch her walk away. Didn't need to. Some endings don't need witnesses. They just need to be honored. By the following Monday, her public persona was gone. Not quiet, erased. The curated feed she once obsessed over? Deleted. The filtered brunch photos, the sunlit captions about growth and vulnerability. The passive-aggressive quotes about loyalty, they vanished overnight. I hadn't even checked. A coworker had mentioned it in passing over lunch. She pulled everything down. Even her LinkedIn. A subtle fallout. The kind reserved for people who don't want questions asked in the wrong circles. No dramatic post, no explanation, just silence. Later that evening, I got confirmation from a quiet source in her former department. HR had initiated a discreet transition. No firing, no email announcement, just reassignment, followed by a series of closed-door meetings. She was now on personal leave. It wasn't punishment. It was disappearance. And that, more than anything, told me how wide the damage had spread. Reputation in certain industries is like glass. One spider crack beneath the surface, and it stops holding weight. You can't tape it back together. The man she'd risked it all for? His wife had found out. A quiet, surgical separation. No public drama. But their inner circle knew. And so did their neighbors. A mutual contact texted me. He moved out. Apartment in the city. No one's calling her either. I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. She'd burned her bridge, then realized too late that she was the one standing on it. And the people she'd hoped would catch her fall? They'd already stepped back. I kept my days simple. Strategic. Closing accounts, rerouting mail, finalizing the division of what little still had her name on it. But through it all I remained calm. Measured. I didn't smear her. Didn't answer questions that weren't mine to address. And because of that, I kept my dignity. My friends didn't scatter. My career didn't flinch. My name held. That's what she underestimated most. Not just my composure, but the weight of it. She thought calm meant weakness. That silence meant indecision. She forgot that sometimes the quietest moves are the most permanent. Her last message came on a Wednesday. Just one line. If you ever want to talk, I'm still here. I let it sit unread for hours. Then, mid-call with my lawyer, as she was listing off final filing dates, I opened the message, read it once, and deleted it without reply. No anger. No performance. Just closure. Because some people say goodbye with screams. Others say it by disappearing. Me? I said it by surviving. The strange part wasn't losing her. It was regaining the space she once filled. Not just the house, but the silence. The way I could hear myself think again. The way dinner tasted when it didn't come with calculation. The way mornings moved without artificial warmth. She'd always filled rooms with a presence that felt magnetic, until I realized it was gravity pulling everything inward toward her. Now the rooms breathed differently. Fully. Honestly. I spent a Saturday painting the guest room. She'd once said we'd never need it, that it was just wasted space. But I wanted it to mean something again. I painted it navy, deep, grounded. A color that held weight without drowning the walls. There was no symbolic gesture in it. No cathartic transformation. Just a quiet act of ownership. A way to say, this house is mine now. Not because she left, but because I stayed. Later that night, I cleaned out the last of her things. Not angrily. Not impulsively. Just methodically. The drawers with stray receipts. The closet shelves she never used, except to hide things she didn't want seen. The basket of cards from friends she no longer returned calls from. I packed it all into a single box and labeled it with her name. No emotion. No note. I set it in the garage. She never came to claim it. I think she knew not to. There were moments, brief, unwelcome, where I still heard her laugh. Not in the house, but in memory. The kind that caught me off guard while folding laundry or driving home from work. A flicker of sound that made me pause, forget. But it passed quickly. The man she betrayed me with remained silent. That was his final act of wisdom. He knew enough to disappear, and I gave him that. Because dragging him into this would have made me smaller. And I was done shrinking for someone else's comfort. That was the real victory. Not revenge. Not public exposure. But recovery without surrender. I spoke with my lawyer the following week. The final documents were ready. Clean signatures. No contests. No delays. She didn't ask for alimony. Didn't challenge the protections I'd filed. I think even she knew she'd lost the leverage she tried to build. When the courier arrived with the envelope, I signed without hesitation. No dramatic pause. No second thought. It was over. Not because the documents said so, but because I was no longer waiting for her to understand what she'd broken. I understood. That was enough.